Hey y'all, Gary here with Tennessee Stands. What I want to get into today is the governor's new plans in 2025 for school choice, i.e. school vouchers. As of today, has now been filed in the General Assembly as House Bill 1 and Senate Bill 1. Before I jump into that, just really briefly, since we are just getting past a monumentally huge election for America, thank God. We are where we are today. I have to say, I've seen a lot of people post this, that folks are feeling unburdened, relieved. I share those feelings with you. I think there is a sense of hope that perhaps we've not completely lost our country. So today is certainly a day to be excited. I believe firmly that God has heard our prayers, granted mercy and a reprieve on this nation. But please hear me, that's just the beginning. So my hope is that we have a lot of folks ready to do the work necessary to heal what is a very broken country right now on several levels, on several policy levels. So I'm excited to see folks like RFK coming into the picture. I'm really hopeful that we will see some accountability in some of these three-digit agencies that we've been dealing with for so long, and I believe that Trump this second time around is much more informed about what he's walking into, and hopefully we'll do a much better job of promises made and promises kept. So we'll see. Be in prayer. I think the most important thing we should be looking for right now in this new administration is not necessarily policy right now, but persons, people who Trump puts around him. That will be the most critical piece over the next couple of months to see, because I believe that with good people in place, good policy will follow. So thank God. I'm so thankful where we are today, and have a lot of hope in the coming 4 years of what we can accomplish to the task at hand in terms of school choice. The bill has been filed, so we're getting back into the groove, right, of legislative session. Bills are going to start to get filed. I'll have more to say about some other efforts at a later date, but today we're going to stick to school choice, and I want to go through step by step, so stick with me. Watch the video. If you walk away saying, well, I don't know what school choice is all about, I don't know what vouchers are all about, I don't know what's in the bill, then you're not paying attention, because I'm about to show you everything that you need to be concerned about, or everything that you need to know about that's in this 11-page bill. So let me get to it. All right, I'm going to scroll down here to some of the more relevant topics. So you can see right off the bat, in terms of the definition of an eligible student, that this language, in my opinion, does effectively, completely remove homeschools from any of this language. That is a good thing. That got worked out last year when this was filed, and so I'm thankful to see that. And I do believe that this language is successful in pulling homeschoolers out of this language. So that's a good thing. Just to know that in the creation and the availability of scholarships moving forward, scholarships every year will be subject to appropriations and the availability of state funds. But in the midst of that, they have limited the scholarships available to 20,000 scholarships. And so here's how that works, because what you're going to hear, right, you're going to hear this a lot from special interest groups, from the governor, from folks that are pushing this bill, is that, well, this is universal school choice, you should support it, it's available to everybody. And I'll be honest, for the most part, okay, it is universal, sort of. But here are the caveats that you need to see. The first 10,000 students, there's an income band, are available to students whose annual household income does not exceed 300% of what the U.S. Department of Education deems to be available for the U.S. federal free lunch or reduced lunch program. So let me show you real quick what that means. All right, so I've pulled up the document that shows the federal guidelines as of 2024 coming into this next school year for what these requirements look like, and I'm just gonna show you right now. Let's just talk about in terms of a family of four. That's a nice average, right? Well, the first income level for a family of four is 185%. That's how you read that, of the federal poverty level, which is $57,720 per year. So the first income band to understand is you've now got to multiply that times 3, which I just did. So let me see. So that $57,000 number times 3, that's 300%, is $173,160. Okay, so what does that mean? That means the first level of income that has to be met for the first 10,000 applications is that family's household income, if they're a family of 4, cannot exceed essentially $173,000 annually. Now, like I said, that's why it's mostly universal. That's going to cover a good bit of Tennesseans who apply, if not most, right? But not everybody, all right? But once those applications have been exhausted, that is when you now go to a truly universal program where it's any student that's eligible, regardless of income. All right, but here's some things to keep in mind. If the number of applications, read this here, if the number of applications received by the department exceeds the number of scholarships available, so if there are only 20 scholarships available and there are more than 20,000 applications, then we have another income band requirement. As you can see, you first have to satisfy all, not there's no limit, by the way, all of the applications that do not exceed 100%. So that's that 57,000 number. So this is for low-income individuals. All of the applications with a household income of less than $57,000 have to be exhausted before then it reaches the next income level of $173,000 a year, again, for a family of 4. And then once that's exhausted, now it becomes truly universal and available to everyone. And by the way, you can see up here that as the number of applications year over year reach 75% of the total available, the next year they have to approve an additional 5,000 scholarships in the state of Tennessee. So the program, number one, is limited to 20,000. That's about 2% of our student population. And it can only grow year over year by 5,000 scholarships, of course, as we saw earlier, subject to how much funds are available by the state. But again, they are still subject to all of these income bands in the case that the number of applications exceeds the number of available scholarships. All right, that clear as mud? That makes sense? Let's keep moving. Here are some of the ways I wanted to point this out that you can spend the money. But I wanted to make sure I point this out so that everybody understands. You can spend the money on tuition, on textbooks and curricula and uniforms, tutoring services, fees for transportation, computer hardware. What you can see when you get to tutoring services, see these little fancy little highlighted parts? That meets the requirements established by the department. That's the State Department of Education, by the way. Fees for transportation and transportation services that meet the requirements established by the department. Computer hardware, technology that meets the requirements. Tuition fees and textbooks, curricula, and instructional materials for summer or after-school academic programs in the private sector, quote, that meet the requirements established by the department. Not the private school, the requirements established by the State Department of Education. All right, you get the picture. And what does that mean exactly? Well, the requirements that the department is going to set are going to be made in what's called promulgating the rules. And so all of the requirements of school choice and the vouchers that are going to necessarily be put on private schools or on individuals receiving this funding is not, as a mouthful, is not all necessarily comprised within the law itself. We've talked about this before, but when the legislature passes a law, there is a department, in this case, the Department of Education, that's now responsible to promulgate rules as to how to administrate that law here in Tennessee. So we don't necessarily know what the requirements are. And by the way, the promulgation of those rules can change. Just like any piece of legislation can change year to year, those rules can change more than year to year. They can change month to month, right? So if the department submits a rule package that has to go before the GovOps committee, they can do that as often as they'd like to add various requirements for these regulations set forth by the General Assembly. So that's how that works. And even after this bill passes, kind of like, pass it and read it later, it's something like that. We've got to pass the bill before we know what kind of requirements and rules are going to be set in place by the State Department of Education. All right, I'll continue. Let me scroll down here. All right. They've been telling you forever and a day that there will be no requirements for this money, right? No requirements, nothing. This is just, in the goodness of their hearts. We're giving your tax money. It's your money. We're giving it back to you, and there are no strings attached. Well, there are, and those come in the form right now. We don't know what requirements, like I said, are going to be promulgated through the rules. We will have to wait and see. But for now, the strings that we can tell you that will be attached are new testing requirements to the private schools. Specifically, students that are in 3rd grade through 11th will be required to take 2 annually administered tests. One is a nationally standardized achievement test. Again, don't miss this part, as determined by the rules of the State Board of Education, and the TCAP exam. So every student now that receives this money going into a private school, regardless of whether or not the private school currently gives TCAP exams or not, they will be required to now take the TCAP exam. Which begs the question, I said this in another venue, but we talk about the No Child Left Behind Act. We talked about what a terrible thing that did to public education. We talk about teaching to the test. We talk about how standardized testing has really ruined public education, because instead of educating students, you are now what they call teaching to the test, right? Which impacts your curriculum and your ability to educate the child in a myriad of different ways, because you've got to teach to the test. So my question is, if we're now requiring private schools to administer the TCAP program, but we're saying, but they don't have any curriculum requirements. We're not gonna mandate curriculum. But what is, and maybe I'm not an educator, so I'll acknowledge I don't know all of what is involved here in teaching to the test. But as much as we've discussed that in the past, it would seem reasonable to assume that if these private school students who are taking these funds now have to pass a TCAP exam every year, that perhaps the curriculum or the way about which this private school goes about educating these children, may have to change somewhat, might be different, in order to make sure that child is prepared to pass the TCAP exam, to show that they are excelling in this program. So I'm speculating here, but it seems to me that I don't, again, if I were administrating a private school, I would not want to take in funds with the thought that now I've got to teach some standardized tests that may impact my ability to teach the way that I want to. All right, I'll move on. Here is a really important part that I think everyone needs to catch. I promise you, I'm probably one of the only people that is going to point this out. They will tell you that this is private information. They're keeping your information private, but here's what I want you to see, all right? Let me read this to you. Each private school shall provide the results of the tests administered, these are these TCAP and nationally standardized tests, to the recipients pursuant to subsection A, to the Office of Research and Education Accountability and the Office of the Comptroller of the Treasury. The state is required to send these testing results to the state. Now, here's what they say. A private school may provide the test results required pursuant to this subsection using aggregated, de-identified data, as long as the data includes grade level, household income level, sex, and race, so that they can go through the data and analyze it. So the law says that the private school has to report to the state, but they can do it in such a way where they don't have to release the names of the students, addresses, social security numbers, so on and so forth. So they can retain the privacy of these students. But I want to point out this word. It says that private schools may provide the de-identified data, okay? Which means what? This is something you got to be aware of in terms of reporting data to the state. It doesn't require the data to be private. A private school may also choose to just send all of your child's data to the state, right? With identification. So, in my opinion, I would think most people would be more comfortable if this word said shall, not may, but a private school shall provide data to the state that is de-identified. So I want to point that out. Your private school, if this goes forward and your child is participating in this program and you're concerned about privacy, may be sending, under this law, your child's data to the state. All right. Here is a critical piece. Now, we have been talking a lot about rejecting this proposal for school choice due to the risk, which I still think are inherent in this bill, of further regulations being placed on the private sector, on private schools, through taxpayer dollars, strings being attached, right? We've talked about that a lot. I will say this language has worked to address that, and that's a good thing. So I can't sit here and look at this bill and hate on the fact that they've worked to put some of this language in here. And I want to read this little section in its entirety, because then I have a comment. So this is new this year. They've just put this in. Autonomy of schools that have recipients enrolled. A private school that enrolls recipients is autonomous and not an agent of this state. Check. B, the creation of the Education Freedom Scholarship Program does not expand the regulatory authority of the state, the officers of this state, or the authority of any LEA to impose any additional rules, regulations, or requirements on private schools that enroll recipients beyond the rules narrowly tailored to enforce the requirements of this program. I will come back to that. Lastly, subsection C. Private schools that enroll recipients must have the maximum freedom to provide for the educational needs of recipients without governmental control. A private school that enrolls recipients is not required to alter its creed, practices, admission policies, hiring policies, or curriculum in order to accept recipients. Okay. I've got 3 things that I want to bring up here. But before I do that, I just want to say, overall, I think it's great that they added this to the bill. It would seem to me, at least on some level, advocacy is working and legislators are hearing your concerns and they're paying attention, because this is new, completely new section where they are working to identify and protect the autonomy of private schools and not impose further regulations. Good stuff. All right, but the first thing I want to point out to you is this is legislation, okay, which can be changed by any future General Assembly, whether it be 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So the first word of caution to you is, while this General Assembly, seemingly, I don't think they have any ill intent necessarily, or at all, perhaps. Not say perhaps. I don't think they have any ill intent here. All right, let me just say that. But this General Assembly may not be the General Assembly 10 years from now. 15 years from now, 20 years from now, which is why we have a concern of putting this train on the tracks. Because once you put a train like this on the tracks and you begin moving tax dollars into private education, and now all of these students and families have an expectation, of this money. They've budgeted. Schools now have built their budgets around receiving these funds. My point is, it's hard to take this train off the tracks in the future. So I want to point out what this General Assembly can control is whether or not we move forward with this plan, right? They can put the train on the tracks or choose not to. But beyond that, they can't control whether or not a future General Assembly may repeal this particular section of the bill and impose new requirements. That's worthy of saying. Here's the second thing I want to point out. This little caveat right here. They can't impose any additional rules, regulations, or requirements beyond the rules narrowly tailored to enforce the requirements of this program. Now, what they're mentioning right now are the testing requirements that we've already talked about. So, it's like you're saying they have autonomy, and we're not going to direct their curriculum or their hiring practice, and they're not agents of the state, except we are going to place testing requirements. But here's another thing I want to point out. Those will be the only narrowly tailored additional requirements as of today. This statement makes room for any future requirements that might be made or placed on these students who are receiving these funds or the private schools who are receiving these funds. And please hear this, is important to know. These future regulations can come in the form of rules, not legislation. So, in order to impose more future regulations that would degrade this perceived autonomy, that does not have to happen through a bill. That can happen simply through the administrative department itself creating new rules and new requirements like more testing or whatever else they may come up with in the future. That does not have to come in the form of legislation. Okay. Lastly, the third thing that I want to point out about this section on autonomy. Here's what I would say to the bill sponsors. If you, and I'm not saying that this would make me support this bill. There are other problems, as you will see. But if they are serious about preserving the autonomy of private schools and homeschools, by the way, I would support and suggest that you put your money where your mouth is and file a constitutional amendment saying such. See, this kind of protection is really, it's nice that it's in the legislation, but it's not really protecting private schools to any great degree until it's in the Constitution, because that is how you restrict any further rulemaking that could impact those rights and any further legislation in a subsequent General Assembly that could impact those rights. So I would just put forward to Governor Bill Lee, to Senator Jack Johnson, to Majority Leader William Lamberth in the House. If you guys are serious about this, then you should file, and the governor should fully support a constitutional amendment that protects those rights of private schools and homeschoolers, regardless as to whether or not they may receive any of these state funds. Protect their autonomy per the Constitution. Just a thought. All right, I'm going to move forward. Here's some things that I think a lot of families with children who might be disabled or have special needs, you need to understand. If you receive these funds per this law, you retain no rights per this state to receive an individualized education program. You have no ability to have an IEP through your local school district if you receive these funds. You will be subject to the standard Individuals with Disabilities Education Act under federal law, just as if you went to any non-public or private school in the state. So that is worthy of consideration. Like we reported last year, it's the same here. This is an entitlement program. it's worth saying this bill is legally defined as a state and local public benefit. It is a welfare program. It is an entitlement program. That is how it is administrated here in the state and through state funding. All right. They do have a section here that says essentially that illegals cannot participate. Just so you know, something similar was in the bill last year, but the Department of Education could not comment on how they were going to accomplish, per federal law, keeping illegal immigrants from participating in this program. So it's in the law. The problem is how we're actually going to do that under federal law. We're not really sure what that process looks like yet. Nonetheless, it's there. All right, y'all. Here's some meat, some financial meat and potatoes. If you're not concerned about anything else, you might be concerned about this, and boy, you really need to hear this one, because I've heard a lot of people say that one of the reasons they support school vouchers and the school choice plan is because we want to create competition in the education marketplace. And by creating competition and funding moving some of this funding towards private schools, that public schools would naturally, per competition, have to perform better or fail, right? I want to wholly dismiss that argument with what's now in this bill. By the way, this is new. This was not in there last year. This is new. And what they are doing is sweetening the pot to try and get the support of school districts across the state. So here's what you need to know. Starting with next year, all right, I'm going to read this highlighted section. An LEA's allocated education funding shall not decrease from one year to the next due to the disenrollment of students from the LEA. If an LEA's calculated TISA allocation decreases from the LEA's TISA allocation for the prior school year, then the department shall allocate additional funds to the LEA in an amount such that the LEA's TISA allocation for the current year is not less than the prior school year. Let me translate what that means. It means that public schools will not be held accountable. That's what it means. It means that essentially public schools are going to get the same money as they would before. It means that when public school students leave the public school, participate in this program, receive state funds, and go to a private school, the public school will still receive the same amount of funding as if the student was still there. That also means that for students who are participating in this program, the state will be paying for this student twice. They'll be paying for the student in public school, which they no longer currently attend, and they will be paying for the student's participation in the private school. How you like them apples? So let me ask you something. Does that sound like competition and accountability to you? I mean, think about the marketplace if we're talking about competition here. The first point is, do you create competition in a free market with government subsidies? Does government subsidy create competition? The answer to that question is no. But secondly, do you create competition with government subsidies when you make sure that one of the competitors, i.e. the public schools, still makes the same amount of money no matter how poorly they might perform? This is neither accountability nor competition. This idea that a rising tide lifts all boats with school choice ain't happening with the governor's plan here in Tennessee. And you, the taxpayer, are going to be on the hook to pay for the student twice. It's critical that all of you understand that. Let's go back to the bill. All right. They're sweetening the deal with two more things for public schools. Per this bill, every teacher that is employed by the state of Tennessee as an educator in this upcoming school year, every teacher will receive a $2,000 bonus. Now, let me make a statement that some of you might hate me for. I don't know. Do some teachers deserve a $2,000 bonus? Yes. Do many teachers deserve a $2,000 bonus? And maybe, I don't know the performance of teachers across the state. Maybe do most teachers deserve a $2,000 bonus? Maybe so. Does every teacher in the state of Tennessee deserve a $2,000 bonus? Hell no. Absolutely not. You know, we should be paying our teachers better. We should be incentivizing good teachers. Good teachers should make more money. Good teachers should get bonuses. Great teachers should get better bonuses. We should be incentivizing good educators to do better in the state of Tennessee and do everything we can to retain great educators in the state of Tennessee. But should we start shucking out bonuses, with equity to every teacher in the state? No, we should not. But what they're doing with this bill is, they're buying support, right? Not only from educators, but from the school district, as you'll see with this next little nugget. Here's the final piece that I have here for you. Subsection 1, 80% of the privilege tax collected under this section must be distributed by the council to the state treasurer for the deposit into an account administered by the state for the use by local education agencies, here's the caveat, for the construction and maintenance of public school buildings. All right, what in the world does that mean? I'm going to tell you. In 2019, when Bill Lee became governor, the General Assembly approved and made legal for the first time in Tennessee sports gaming, sports betting. All right, even on an online format. You can now, and for the first time in 2019, you can download an app and you can now place online bets, you can game, and you can do sports betting in Tennessee. All right, it's now a regulated industry here in the state. And what they did was, of the privilege taxes, the tax revenue collected from those activities, 80% of that money was going into the traditional lottery education fund. And so I won't get into that fund, but the lottery education fund already has a process as to how those education funds are administered. So 80% of those gaming funds were sent to the lottery. Okay, now they are sweetening the deal for our local educators and county commissions, by the way. This is they're buying influence. So instead of sending it to the lottery account, 80% of all of those gaming revenues, those tax revenues, will now be held in an account in the comptroller's office for disbursements directly to the school districts for construction and development projects. Now, if you're in counties, for example, I'm in Williamson, these folks are building schools like crazy, and big, beautiful, multi-million-dollar buildings. And a lot of folks know that at the county level, right, there's a lot of friendly deals being made between commissioners, school districts, and developers to get these contracts to build these schools. In fact, there's a lot of data out there to support, at least in our county right now, that the building of these schools is significantly outpacing the population increase right now. Okay, that's not my statistic; that's by others. But the point is, whether it be to build school buildings, to make sure that school districts don't lose funds, or to give teachers bonuses, this is an effort made by the General Assembly to get the buy-in of school districts, most school districts around the state who currently oppose school choice. All right, that is the bill in its entirety. Those are all of the key things that you need to know. And here, I'll close with this. I cannot support a new entitlement program in the state of Tennessee. I cannot support putting tax dollars into private schools when we are already seeing new requirements come in the form of new standardized testing requirements now on these private schools. In addition, even in their statement of protecting the autonomy, in addition to the risk of further rules being promulgated that may increase in the future those requirements on these private schools, whether it be testing or whatever requirements. And lastly, financially, how irresponsible is it that in order to get the buy-in of school districts to put this plan in place, we are now going to pay for the education of these students twice from the state coffers. And by the way, if what I didn't even mention, in the public school, they now have less students and the same money. So essentially, I mean, a net result of more funding, right? Since the student population has decreased. Well, what does a school district necessarily do with that additional funding? What do you think they do? Do you think the teachers get raises? Do you think that they buy more classroom materials? Or do you think that superintendents and some of the executive school administrators get pay raises? What do you think happens with the extra money that now taxpayers are giving to public schools, regardless of whether or not they perform well? All right, that's all I've got for you today. God bless you. This is what's going on in Tennessee. This is what's been submitted in terms of school choice. By the way, this is HB1 and SB1. We'll have more to say about this in the future. Set the school choice debate aside. Thank you, Lord God, for having mercy on our nation. Thank you for this election and the outcome. God, may you protect and bless President Trump and this new administration. May you guide him, give him wisdom and discernment. And Lord, we ask that you put people in place that care about freedom, liberty, and will do everything within their power, God, to preserve the freedom and liberty that, God, you have ascribed to this nation. God, founded on a belief that ultimately you are God. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, everyone. God